livable, beautiful, and dynamic city is one shared by many. In the winter months, we marvel at the clear skies and the snow-capped mountains that encircle LA like a big hug. Exciting shows, professional sports, conferences dealing with every subject under the sun are held at Staples and the convention centers. There are heroes in our city, poverty providers always fighting to make sure that the gentrification of downtown includes hope for the displaced and the homeless who remain a part of downtown's landscape. In less than 2 decades, Los Angeles has rebuilt from one of the worst urban civil unrests in U.S. history. Shaken by the 1994 Northridge earthquake, political and business leaders alike resolved to move forward and keep dreaming of a downtown deserving of this megapolis. Remembering the movie Grand Canyon depicting LA as a city with great social divides, a city as stratified by cultural diversity as the geology of the mammoth Grand Canyon itself. Then the Paul Haggis movie, Crash, brilliantly examined the fear of human differences, which can make for confrontation, even as the best in our human qualities works for assimilation. The continued building, the continued advocacy, and the continued dreaming of each of us is what is changing the skyline of Los Angeles as we overcome the divides made by freeways, cultural differences, and socioeconomic disparities. All of the episodes of LA Business Today are available on demand on the website for Channel 35. Our producers, Jessica Jimenez and Justin Scott Cummins, worked with the talented crew at Channel 35 and Bob and I to accomplish interviews about business that include leaders who have the vision to see this city move towards $1 trillion economy and take its place among the greatest cities in the world. I love LA, while everyone leaves a piece of their heart in San Francisco, to be sure. Los Angeles offers all who live here a chance to paint on a very large canvas. We are the most diverse city in the world, with challenges as great as any city in the nation. But there's no city quite like LA, and I think at the end of the day, we all know it. It is the we that is triumphing over the me, so that the Grand Canyon is becoming the Grand Ciudad, the one city undivided, and Crash is becoming healed, a city where differences are being championed and fears are dissolving. We salute the Grand Ciudad, Los Angeles, in this episode. I'm Sharon Jimenez for LA Business Today.
That time of year again, to clear all that annoying dry brush from around your house. In the event of a fire, dry brush is extremely combustible and can explode. By clearing brush 200 feet from your home, you create a barrier, lessening the likelihood of spreading a fire. I'll still be here when you get back! Get the message. Be prepared.
Let's get an update now on the business of investment banking. This is the process through which companies grow and are made, and it is something worth looking at right now, particularly when the lifeblood of our economy depends on the economic growth and expansion of people looking for the American dream. With me now is Mr. Mark Salter. He is founder of a company called New Century Capital Partners, based right here in Los Angeles. Welcome to LA Business Today.
Great to be here, Bob.
This is a company you started how long ago?
About 2.5 years ago.
And before that?
Before that, I was head of investment banking at a local investment banking firm called Wedbush Morgan Securities, actually located right in downtown Los Angeles.
All right, tell me what your company does, and is there any difference from what you've done before?
Actually, we can do anything that any large premier bank can do, meaning we buy companies, sell companies. We're very active in mergers and acquisitions, restructurings. We actually finance companies. So we can take a company public. We can complete a private placement, any sort of capital raise along those lines. All
right, the key question is, what's the state of affairs in companies in Los Angeles? How are they doing? And I guess you're pretty busy.
We are. We're actually very busy, and especially given what's happening across Wall Street, meaning some of the large banks are having difficult times or even being shut down, we're the beneficiary of that. we're seeing incredible amounts of deal flow, and that is these small to mid-size or even large companies seeking growth capital. They're wanting to grow. They're continuing to look for debt or equity and sources of capital. Also, a number of those companies are seeking exits. Because of the IPO market today, as you, I'm sure, know, it's very much shut. So now, instead, they're looking to be sold, or they're looking for a strategic partner, a merger partner. So our business is very exciting and very active these days.
Okay, so what do you tell, given all things being equal, what do you tell a mid-sized company when they're saying, okay, time to get out, it's time to leave? Do you say no, stick it out a little longer, maybe merge, or what?
Well, it really depends on, every case is very different, as you can imagine. So it really depends on the prospects, the growth prospects, really the interest of the shareholders, what's the priority for the shareholders, for the board of directors. And what we like to do is really set up a series of alternatives. So at New Century Capital Partners, we are the trusted investment banker, the trusted advisor. And as a result, we'll give them a variety of options, be it stay private, think about a trade sale, think about a recapitalization, that is new money coming into the company, or think about a reverse merger or things along those lines.
I got a little ahead of myself. What kind of companies that we're talking about? You say they're all sizes, but what do they do?
So they're companies that are in various areas of technology, be it digital media, internet, e-commerce, business services. And in terms of the size range, Bob, anywhere from, I would say, 10 million in revenues, say on the low end, up to 500 million, 700 million in revenues on the high end.
Which of these companies are doing well and look like they have sustainability? Which companies aren't?
So I would say broadly, especially in Los Angeles, where entertainment is key, we're seeing a lot of derivative plays off of entertainment. And what is that? Mobile media, we see that being very active. Wireless is very active. People want mobile devices. They want applications on their BlackBerries, on their iPhones, etc. We see a lot of activity in digital media, which is really the taking old line media and making it go across the internet. That's very active. And then we're seeing some of the classic business services, which are business-to-business applications.
Okay, if you're a mid-sized company and you need an infusion of capital, how easy is it for the banks to lend you the money?
Sure, and again, what I would say is that a lot of the rules today are changing. So historically, a private company might go to their local commercial bank. Now what you're seeing is you're seeing other hedge funds come into the market, which are funds that are private funds that are seeking to make that investment. You're seeing mezzanine funds come in as well. And so there's really that supply of capital available to those companies that are well-positioned and are premium companies, high-end providers.
Is it easier or safer? I know this may be tooting your own horn, but is it easier or safer going through you rather than going through a standard commercial bank?
Well, it's interesting because all of the bankers at New Century Capital Partners, they're all from the largest banks on Wall Street, meaning Deutsche Bank, CS First Boston, Merrill Lynch, and so on. So we have vast relationships with the largest institutions on Wall Street. And these are pools of capital, such as Ares Capital in Century City. They run about $45 billion in assets. So Ares Capital, Ramius, and so on, they're seeking high growth, high quality investment opportunities, and those are our clients.
All right, did you bring your crystal ball with you? Because I want you to pull it out right now. And I want you to look in it, metaphorically speaking,
Sure.
and tell us what your long-term view is of money availability, how these companies are going to fare in the long term, whether there should be some sort of panic inclinations, or do we just kind of stick it out, bite the bullet, wait for better times?
Well, I think, again, if you look at the cycles and the ebbs and flows of Wall Street and what's happening in today's economy, it's very similar to what we saw, say, in the early 2000s, and that is the dot-com era. And we banked a lot of those companies. I was the banker for E-Trade, Pixar, and many of others that had the highs and then they had the pullback. So I think the ebbs and flows will continue, and in our view, we believe that the best of breed providers, those companies, again, with premier management teams that serve large and growing markets, those are always going to have access to capital. Now, in today's market, maybe the only difference is the cost of capital is slightly different.
Yeah.
The cost has gone up.
Sure. Let's hope your optimism stays with you, not only for your sake, but for the economy in general, because we want to see companies go the long haul and weather this storm. Mark Salter, thanks very, very much. You've given us some pretty good information today,
Great.
and I'm glad that you came by and we had this chance to talk.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bob. Nice to be here.
There's a great deal of optimism about the future of Los Angeles, even as we each get up every day and cope with the economic crisis we all know is going to be here with us for a while.
LA Business Today is really about you, the people who make up the business leadership of Los Angeles in the for-profit and not-for-profit businesses and foundations that really connect all of us.
We hope you've enjoyed going inside the new JW Marriott Hotel that we are all watching go up in downtown Los Angeles.
And we hope you've learned something about the investment banking world that is supporting new technologies in the media.
LA Business Today is available on demand on the Channel 35 website, lacityview.org. If you enjoyed the show, please tell your friends about us and email them the link to see the show online.
We thank you for watching, and please join us for another episode of LA Business Today.
G'day, Troy McCubbin from North Hollywood. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35, our city, our channel.
Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recovery and Reinvestment. We have a quorum here with council members Parks, Perry, Wesson, and myself. We are here in Van Nuys City Hall, and it is August 7th. And with that, let's hear a report on our stimulus dollars. No cash for clunkers today, right?
No cash for clunkers. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Bill Kreitz with the CAO's office. I will be Jim Clark, at least until he gets here.
All right.
He's speaking at a breakfast meeting. He did ask me, however, to mention two things. He asked me to mention that we did not receive funding for the transportation electrification projects from ARA, but rather the money went instead to major car manufacturers who have already received TARP funding, as well as, speaking of cash for clunkers. So he just wanted to inform you of that. He will probably, when he gets here, you may want to go into some detail on that.
Wait, just remind the committee and the public, we had applied for those dollars for the electric truck program?
Yes. I believe those are mainly related to the port.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And he also said that he was going to hand out a regional consensus group letter on the Tiger projects. It was submitted to the state. I don't happen to have that letter with me, so he may be bringing that for distribution when he comes. With that, I'll get into my project management briefing. With 84% of the departments reporting, and we have prepared some dashboards for you that show some various statistics on the ARA Grants project. Those are part of your package. There are 4 so far. I would be glad to discuss those or entertain questions, or if the time is limited today, you could review those and we could certainly discuss those at next Friday's ad hoc committee meeting.
Sorry, where are those in the packet?
They should
the dashboard report?
Yes, they should be the first thing, the second item, beginning with the second item.
Got you. So, committee members, this is in the big packets before us, and looks like that. These reports give us some overview of the requested versus awarded funds by category. So, do we have... I see, for instance, on bonds and tax credit, we got 100% of what we asked for. On public safety, I see we got about less than 10% of what we asked for. Same thing with energy and environment. So this is actually pretty good to see where our dollars are coming in. And I think a lot of people have asked us those questions in what categories. Why can't we spend this on local community projects when sometimes it's for very specific categories here. And then the jobs created by category as well is a very good one on the second packet. And these are all available for the public as well on our recovery.lacity.org website.
We wanted to bring them to the ad hoc committee first, but we will post them as soon as we return to the office.
That'd be great. Those will be made available today. I think folks can see on the jobs in particular what we're looking at. Our overall jobs, I'm trying to do some quick addition here, is about...
It's about
15,000?
I was going to say about 95% of the jobs were created in 5 departments.
Okay. And those are in energy, environment, transportation, infrastructure, public services, housing and economic development, and public safety. And many of them, as we see on the third packet, are at the Port of Los Angeles. It looks like about 7,000 of those jobs are there, about 4,000 through the Community Development Department. I know Mr. Wesson has been working hard as our HCED chair on our community grants, and then the Airports and Housing Authority. And then the biggest recipient, it looks like, has been the Department of Water and Power so far in terms of our departments, about $215 million?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything you want to pull out from those of interest?
What I might mention with respect to the DWP, since you mentioned that also includes a $200 million smart grid that we recently obtained, or that we recently requested. So that it doesn't necessarily skew that, but it just puts that in a little bit more perspective.
So does that change that first one that shows only $39 million in energy and environment? Should that be 200 and something?
I believe you're correct, yes.
So before we put this up for the public, why don't we make that addition, and then we can make them more accurate. Yes, Mr. Park?
Yes, you know what, we will.
We grab your microphone just for...
Who's going to be posted?
We'll post this on the LA Recovery website, both the intra and the internet.
And that URL for the public is recovery.lacity.org. Recovery.lacity.org. Any other points from here?
Not at this time, no.
Thank you for that. Any other overview?
Oh, yes, if I could, please. The ARA team has also reviewed, last Tuesday with the county, we reviewed the Microsoft Stimulus 360 grants tracking system. So we discussed that and met with the county on what they are using, or at least one of the components that they're using to track the ARA grants and funding process. In addition to that, I would just briefly like to go over some of the information that differs from last week. We have one grant application that was submitted to the grantor since this committee met last Friday. In addition to that, the number of grant projects for which ARA funding has been requested is now at 98. And I did make a note here, that differs from the 74 we've shown before, because we had taken a number of items, in particular DOT and some other projects, that we collapsed into one item. We broke those out now, so therefore that number has increased, and that's the reason. There's a little explanation for that as well. And that applies also to the number of grant awards. At last week's meeting, I believe we showed 16 grant awards. That's now 45, only because we broke out a number that were collapsed into one category. We broke those out individually. And that's also why your master database or spreadsheet that we have has now gone to 48 or 49 pages. And that's the reason for that. We're also looking at 3 grant applications that will be due to the granting agencies in this upcoming week. And other than that, I'm glad to answer any questions or allow
any questions of a general nature from the committee, or should we go into the 5 things we have? Mr. Sparks, and if you don't mind, just grabbing the microphone so the public can hear your sonorous tones.
Did we just have a big jump? Because it seems like the last meeting I was at, we were at like 300 million received. Now it's jumped to 7. Did we just have a flood of things come in?
Yes, we had the smart grid come in for DWP. That was 200 million. We also added in the Recovery Zone Economic Development bonds. I believe that's at 448. Okay. 448,651. So yes, that did. You're correct. It did go up quite a bit as a result of those 2 items.
Okay. Thank you. That is a jump.
And so our grand total now is about what?
In terms of grant awards?
And the bonds are tough to count as necessarily grants because those are obviously not grants.
That's true. I might say that the word awarded is somewhat loosely defined by the inclusion of those bonds, yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, general questions? Okay. Let's go to the first items then. 1A, B, C, and let's take, why don't we have those A, B, and C together, even though we have 3 different agencies, if you don't mind, all coming up together, since it's from the same Broadband Technology Opportunities Program. And with 3 agencies, do we have one, is ITA lead on this for everybody, or are we kind of in 3 silos? Okay.
Housing Authority is a little different than the cities.
Okay, all right. Why don't we start, and I imagine CRA is too then, so why don't we start with ITA? If you just explain what the grants, the program is first.
Good morning, council members. Mark Wolf with ITA. Back in March, the mayor's office requested ITA to lead and facilitate the city's ARA broadband grant process, working with the key city stakeholders. ITA formed 3 working groups to focus on the grant areas anticipated, including community access and affordable housing, infrastructure, and public safety. Numerous departments were part of this team. ITA worked with libraries, CDD, Rec and Parks, Aging, Housing, HACLA, CRA, Police and Fire, General Services, DWP, Street Lighting, and the Zoo. As a result of this work, 3 grant proposals have been formulated. HACLA will be has the lead on the first. The second, ITA is leading with a number of participant departments, and the third is with CRA, and they'll be explaining more detail on that. ITA has developed a grant application for public access computer centers. ITA is lead on the grant with participation from Library, Rec and Parks, CDD, and Aging. This grant application is known as the LA CAN program. It's approximately a $7.5 million application. It's all about digital inclusion, providing access equipment and training for children, adults, and seniors that don't have access to the internet. It's a one-year project that will create and or upgrade a network of 189 public computer center locations at facilities throughout the city.
So just to be clear, these are existing ones, these are not necessarily new computer centers?
They are existing. There are some new locations. The difference also is some of these locations currently only have computers with no internet access.
Right.
So this will bring in new equipment, refreshing equipment for existing locations that have equipment as old as 6+ years, and in addition, it will provide connectivity for locations that do not have them.
And I'm sorry to stop you for a second there. Is that list there's something without a title on it that starts with AYE Catholic Charities Wilshire Office. Is that the list of the locations here?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
So the benefits will include adding internet broadband connections to 35 city computer centers that currently don't have access, replacing almost 3,700 public access computers. Again, most of these are very old. Adding about 550 new public access computers to existing sites. When the project's complete, it'll provide about 4,200 internet-connected public access computers at 189 locations throughout the city.
What model are we using for those computers? I mean, not the particular computer models, but I mean, are we doing full-blown PCs? Are we doing some sort of internet terminals?
These are full-blown PCs.
With software suites on them? Are we
Yes.
migrating this towards the cloud?
Actually, this is not part of the...
No, I know it's not part of that, but can we save some dollars there? Or?
That's something that we can investigate, but at this point, we've costed it out for Office suites that would be loaded on the devices.
Okay. Thank you.
So with this, in addition to the equipment and to the access, the important part is online and in-person training that will be provided throughout these locations. This will include computer and internet skills job training, job search skills, homework assistance, and transportation planning. As I mentioned, the total grant request is approximately $7.5 million in federal funds for computers, related equipment, networking, and one administrative position that will assume the project management responsibility. This grant does require a 20% match from the city. Therefore, the program budget includes a city in-kind contribution of $2.4 million for support staff salaries and $2.3 million for facility occupancy costs. Other in-kind cost areas...
So that first piece is out of existing salary?
That is correct.
Okay.
Other in-kind costs also include in the budget software, broadband connectivity, and other contract expenses. And in regards to the number of jobs this program will create, the LA CAN project will enable no less than 50 jobs be saved at manufacturers and sales offices of the vendors from whom the city purchases the equipment. In addition, it will also retain or create one city position. And one of the indirect benefits of this grant opportunity is if only 1% of the people that come to the centers find jobs, that could result in as many as 20,000 people based on the millions of end users that come to the LA CAN centers and are given job training, computer training, and are afforded access to online search engines, including the recently developed library job hunting guide. So that concludes our comments, ITA's comments, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, yeah. Ms. Berry.
Couple of quick questions. Once installed, who's responsible for the, I guess you call it the security maintenance and IT issues as they might arise on site? How's that handled?
The staff from the individual departments, Rec and Parks, Library Department, and so forth, have existing IT staff that are supporting the existing equipment that are there. So those departments will take...
So each park has one? Has an IT person?
Actually, no. They have they have roving staff that are, I believe, centered in their downtown location and some of their satellite locations, which go between the various sites today.
Okay, and then in terms of, I guess, on-site security of the computers, how does that work?
The staff department staff that are present that oversee the centers today, they are responsible for overseeing the safety of the equipment and ensuring that that there's, oversight and staff available when the staff are actually using them. And part of the program also involves not only the security aspect, but also assistance in questions and training also in using the equipment.
Okay, one last quick question. On one of the list, there's a project at 628 South San Julian. It's called Skid Row Housing Project, and it's LITE, L-I-T-E. And I represent that area, and I'm not familiar with that project. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, I'd like to have one of my colleagues from ITA respond to that, because I'm not familiar with that particular location myself.
Yeah. They did get an image, though, which isn't that new.
Good morning, Terry Halberg, Information Technology Agency. That's a CDD-administered location that you were referring to?
What do they do there?
The list that was provided of those computer technology centers were really based on the requirements that were defined by the departments that are partnering with us on that. So I'd really have to get back to you on the specifics as far as that site. And
I'd like that, because I do a lot of
CDD here in the back.
CDD.
Is anybody here from CDD know what that center does? Nope. Different division.
Okay. All right. I'll tell you, I spend an enormous amount of time working in Skid Row, and, I basically know every block, and I've never heard of this program. And that doesn't mean it's not a good program, but, I want to make sure that whatever money we get, we spend it in the best way possible. And I was really thrilled to see you got new image there, and all of the parks that are really in great need. But this one, I need more information on this one. Okay?
We'll follow up with your office on that.
And just a general question: is there flexibility on the locations if we're recently getting grants for one of the places on here, and there's another place that could be freed up? How does the federal grant work? Are we able to switch some locations out?
That's a really good question, and what we'll really want to do is look at, as we understand what the requirements with an award that would be attached to a particular award would be, and using the funds, within how they were described in the proposal, I would have to assume that if we're looking at the same number of computers at a similar location, there would be flexibility there.
Okay. And what's the pool overall that we're applying from nationwide?
The allocation for this particular grant? $500 million. I'm sorry, it's $50 million.
$50 million nationwide, and we're applying for 7.5 of it?
Yes.
If our experience with the COPS grants and our diesel emissions grants and other ones are any indicator, it seems like the administration is doing kind of a very peanut butter approach to all this stuff and spreading it out very thinly across the country. And how do we prioritize if we get, say, $500,000 worth of this? How are we going to prioritize the locations?
We would work with the individual departments that are administering those sites to really try and identify what their top priorities are. We do know that there is a second round of this particular grant, that the notice of funds availability is expected at the end of this year, calendar year. So
is that expected to be another $50 million, or we're not sure?
The entire program was $200 million for that particular category, public computer centers. So it could be whatever the balance was, another 175, or it could be 50, or it could be 100.
Okay. I'd like to instruct ITA to include the council offices in those deliberations. A lot of us are working on technology centers and have a good, deep knowledge, I think, of which ones would be good. The departments do as well, but I think to add that layer would be important. So if we can make sure to, in future rounds, do that, and then even as these get awarded and we have to decide where the prioritization occurs, still keeping the geographic balance that you have here, but making sure that we have a voice in that input too. Okay.
We will.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's, any other questions on the ITA piece?
Let me just ask a question, so I understand it. We're basically changing out equipment that currently exists.
The majority of the equipment is being replaced.
Is it a requirement of a site that you have staff to allow people to walk their way through it, or are they set up to where individuals can come out and just navigate the computer for information?
It would be a combination depending on the site and the particular program. So in a library environment, there would be some general computers would be available just for general internet use.
For the general public can come in and use them. There's no one on site at the library to give them job training or anything like that.
There would be some specific programs that might be scheduled around training, and then that's going to be department-specific and site-specific as well. So there's really a variety of programs that go along with the computer hardware itself. It would really depend on that particular department.
So I understand it is that, so every place that we've identified, they're not cookie cutters. Some will have equipment where people can come in and navigate. Some will have staff, and we're enhancing, like the one-stop centers, we're enhancing their ability.
And even within those scenarios, there would be some flexibility on just open access versus some scheduled training.
Okay. The other thing I was going to ask is that have we considered, and I forget how many we have, some of the neighborhood city halls that we've created? Many of them, if there's not a need to have staff at each location, many of them provide access for neighborhood councils, but there's room in some of them to where you can have community come in and use computers. Have we considered the neighborhood city halls, council offices, field offices as maybe a site?
We would have to take a look at those as potential locations for the LA CAN sites.
Okay. So if we could look at that, I'd appreciate it, because I think we, particularly for myself over on Vermont, we have a thriving city hall there, and one of the things that it would be an enhancement if we had the ability to community come in and use computers and navigate. We wouldn't have staff there, but they certainly would be able. I think we have a large community room. A portion of it could be set aside for computer access for the community. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Housing Authority, I think, is next.
Morning.
Morning.
Ken Simmons, Housing Authority. Before I start, I'd like to thank ITA, Randy Levin, and particularly Terry Hallberg here, who kept us in the loop and everything that the city was developing. But unfortunately, in the end, we were not able to participate in a couple of the programs. The one Terry was just talking about, and Mark was talking about, with the public centers. We attempted to include some of our public centers, but I think the location of the centers conflicted with the areas that are already chosen, and it was essentially already covered by the recreation and other programs that they had selected. On the other one, the broadband access, or CRA, is...
So in this list, you would say there are close-by sites for every housing project we have in the city?
Well, for the ones where we were able to, where our centers were, yes. It was already served by another city facility. On the broadband access, and this is one where CRA, I think, is working with One Economy, we couldn't participate in that model either because of the financial commitment. It is no cost for the first couple years. You start paying at the tail end of that, and by the fourth year...
The Housing Authority.
By the fourth year, you assume the responsibilities for the internet as well as the maintenance of the system. And in our estimate, that was about $500,000 a year that we didn't think we'd commit to. We were approached, however, by a group led by the Housing and Development Law Institute, which is an association of public housing law people, and we are a member of that group. And they put together a program, a team where they're teaming up with a group called Converged Services and Blackstone Technology. And their proposal is they're going to enter into all of our public housing sites except for Jordan, where we already have a program to put in Wi-Fi. But they'll go on the remaining sites. It is a model that is a no-cost model. It's driven by revenue. They will do advertising to cover the full cost of maintenance and service. And they will also include in their grant a computer for each of our residents. Essentially, if the grant goes forward, we'll have computers and access for about 6,200 units throughout our public housing sites.
What sort of equipment are we looking at for each household?
It'll be a bare bones basic computer that will have
Laptop or desktop?
It's going to be a desktop.
So in the home?
Yes. And most of them won't be hardwired. There'll be some kind of Wi-Fi setup that we're looking at with Jordan Downs, the cloud, and people have access in that way.
How's Jordan Downs working, by the way? How many folks is there any way to count the metrics of how many people are using the Wi-Fi?
Well, it isn't up and running yet.
Oh, it still is not?
No, it's still not. The latest number is that they think they'll be done by the end of August in the setup, and we hope to launch it in September.
Okay. Any questions about public housing? Good. Mr. Parks?
I may have missed it on the match.
Pardon me?
I may have missed your
Oh,
comment.
there is no match. The association, the group will put the 20% in. There's no cost.
So there's a match, but not for the city?
For us, yes.
Yep. Okay. All righty. Thank you. Appreciate it. CRA? Still have money to do anything? Still have...
No, that's why we're using One Economy's grant.
Right.
Good morning. I'm Jenna Guliger with the Community Redevelopment Agency. We too are going to be working with One Economy. They're putting forward the same kind of application where they're proposing to retrofit affordable housing units and provide services and actually free internet for 3 years. So their grant is going to provide the wireless data network, a central computer lab, if it's appropriate, at the site, 3 years of internet service and 3 years of monitoring, and then also an adoption package that would include web content and also the Digital Connectors Youth Program. What CRA is offering is to commit to trying to get our expiring covenants units. So these are affordable housing units whose affordability covenants are expiring in the next few years. We expect those units will be coming to us to refinance, and we'll be asking those developers to partner with One Economy to use the broadband services if they're granted.
I just stated where I was.
So their total, this would be for 902 units they've identified that could possibly be eligible. It's actually 4 projects, and the total project cost is just over $623,000. They are also providing the match of about $125,000, so the grant amount is about $479,000.
Jack.
Do you have a list of where those projects are?
That's why I grabbed my BlackBerry, because I left it on my desk, and I can get that to you. But I actually have I thought I had the list. I have the council districts here, which are actually...
I have the districts.
the 9th, the 1st, the 4th, and the 14th, and I will get that to the council members.
The only reason it came up, and happy to have it in other parts of the city, we're working with One Economy around Belmont High School on getting computers into low-income homes, and would love to see if there's some flexibility to help that initiative here too.
Yeah, so the way the program is written, actually, and the reason we're only targeting these 4 particular projects is you have to be able to give access to an entire census block, so it can't just be an individual project or an individual home. And so they decided that it was best to focus on projects that were 200 units and above. So we just looked for the ones that were going to be coming up soon for refinancing, and we had to limit it that way.
Okay. 7. That's just that category. Thank you. No, I have this one. This is from the earlier one, from the IT one? Or this one? Right. Okay. Any other questions about the One Economy stuff? CRA? Okay. If we could get those addresses, that'd be great. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Well, they're not open, right?
Well, they're not.
They haven't even started spending it. If we can go to D, D, the smart grid.
This is not true. I just, I'm going to get, I'm sorry, Orchard doesn't come after us, waste for our years.
She made down the road. Yeah.
This is not creating.
She'll put on the record.
What they did here, they broke out by jobs retained versus created.
It's not true.
Not disputing anybody's methodology. Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
How are you?
Morning, members of the Ad Hoc Committee. My name is Joseph Avila, Staff Assistant to the General Manager of the Department of Water and Power. With me this morning is Dr. Ali Marabi, and the two of us very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today to share with you an update on the Department's activities, specifically in relation to DWP's Smart Grid Investment Grant application. Over the past several years, DWP's been evaluating the feasibility of implementing a new way of managing electricity along its local distribution network through an architecture commonly referred to as smart grid technology. Dr. Marabi will provide you with additional details on exactly what that architecture entails, but in essence, its design is very much like that of an information technology system, with hardware infrastructure including transmission, substation, and meter upgrades, middleware represented by interface systems and data collectors, and software, which includes various types of applications for manipulating hardware and analyzing real-time data provided by this new architecture. The fundamental goals of the Department's Smart Grid system are wholly consistent with many of its current initiatives, including the RPS, energy efficiency, and climate change efforts. Specifically, the Smart Grid implementation will enable DWP to more efficiently manage its energy resources by knowing how much and where energy is being consumed, identifying waste and inefficiency in the distribution system, forecasting demand and outages in real time, and reducing overall energy consumption across all customer classes. The Department's Smart Grid implementation is also expected to lower the Department's carbon emissions and greenhouse gas levels on a system-wide basis. The Smart Grid program represents a new frontier for the DOE, as evidenced by the fact that, based on feedback provided by DWP and other utilities across the country, the DOE increased the Smart Grid investment grant allocations from $20 million to $200 million. The Department of Water and Power Smart Grid application was successfully submitted yesterday and is seeking $200 million in federal stimulus funding to fund the Smart Grid program consisting of 7 initiatives.
And just to be clear, that's of $200 million total in the country?
$4.5 billion.
$4.5 billion,
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
okay. I thought the changes made there. Okay.
The 7 initiatives were chosen in response to the criteria set forth by the Department of Energy and those areas that were deemed eligible for support through funds from the Smart Grid Investment Grant. These initiatives include the following: integration of renewable generation and customer resources. It helps with the integration of our wind farms, our distribution of solar resources and plug-in hybrid technology, transmission automation, the acceleration of installation of equipment and asset upgrades, including installation of phaser measurement units at substations, upgrading tie line meters. Substation automation. The automation of up to 60 additional substations, bringing the total automation up to 125, or 83% of the system, significantly improving the ability to support smart grid functionality going forward. Distribution automation, automating all 34 kV switches, capacitors, and transformers to add smart grid capabilities for distribution system controls. Advanced metering infrastructure, installation of 1.4 million smart meters to 100% of the Department's customers, supported by a common, secure, fixed, and wireless communication network, and providing dynamic pricing options for our customers. Systems integration, integration of infrastructure control systems and information systems to improve decision-making and operating efficiency of the electric power system. And finally, communications, upgrading and completing communications backbone throughout the system by installing fiber optic cable to 108 substations and developing a wireless communication network for smart grid support. In summary, the Smart Grid Investment Grant represents a unique opportunity for DWP and the city to realize one of its long-term goals of implementing a fully integrated smart grid system. DWP had a shovel-ready $1 billion 10-year plan to execute the aforementioned initiatives. However, with the availability of Smart Grid Investment Grant funds, the department will significantly accelerate the deployment of this fully integrated system over 3 years, create 500 new net jobs, and lower the cost of environmental impacts and by providing electricity to the city of Los Angeles in a much more efficient and environmentally friendly way. That concludes my presentation, and Dr. Marabi and I are here to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. For the Smart Grid implementation program, do we have any idea in terms of the energy consumption of or electricity provided to the ratepayers of DWP, what percentage that is of our overall national load? we've been trying to do different metrics to what would be, if they do take a kind of peanut butter approach and just spread it everywhere, what's our fair share?
Oh, okay.
And so in terms of pegging, where we should be of the 4.5 billion, we'd like to have some ammunition should it fall short in terms of, well, we're not just 4 million people of 300 million in the country, but we consume, this percentage of the overall national load.
Well, that's a great question. Actually, we looked at, in talking to the DOA and also some of our consultants, the metrics are really broken down into two areas. One is the technological approaches that we're using, and they look at it based on the sort of approaches and whether it's consistent with the criteria. But the other is somewhat subjective. I think they're going to be definitely looking at spreading the $4.5 billion geographically. They're also going to be looking at, large utilities versus small utilities, and whether or not they're promoting new technologies within those utilities. So there's an element that's going to be purely based on the technological merits, and then there's going to be a part that's subjective. So I would say that to the extent that we're going to be doing obviously some advertising of what we're trying to accomplish here, but if you have any contacts back in Washington, certainly some pressure can be brought to bear by the elected officials here in singing the praises of the approach, and we'll be providing you with details to enable you to craft some talking points to speak intelligently about what we're trying to do. It won't be based on megawatts. It'll be based on the technical merits, and then, like I said, there'll be a fairly significant subjective criteria applied as well.
And we do have some very strong contacts at Department of Energy for this, and some Angelinos who are there.
Our director would be helpful. Yes, ma'am. Yes, absolutely.
For the average person out there, I think you gave a decent, somewhere between the highly technical and plainest of plain English. If this money comes through, how is this money going to be spent on jobs? What sort of jobs have you identified that would actually be available, those retained and those that would be added if this money came through?
Basically, there will be 8 types of organization that will be sharing the resources. About the 500 so people, and we have identified at the higher level what kind of personnel we may need. So in the 7 areas that Joe mentioned, we'll be dividing the resources into those, and there'll be engineers, management analysts, there'll be mechanics, there'll be meter setters, meter installers, there'll be construction crews of various sorts, such as electric mechanics, IT personnel, and telecommunication groups, and customer services representatives. So it's a mix of pretty much we're talking all aspects of the department business, from generation to transmission to substation, distribution, and then the customer side, the meters.
Councilmember, the approach that was required to put this together was cross-functional, from IT to power to customer service and billing. So it'll impact, from a jobs creation standpoint, every part of our business. And the total jobs are actually over 600 within the department. So there's quite a few sustained jobs. The estimate on net new jobs was 500.
So 500 net new and 100 retained?
Over 100 retained jobs, yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions on the smart grid, folks? Smart grid? Okay. No, thank you. Appreciate the presentation. All right, so if we can go to number 2. And this one's big, guys. This is $448 million of economic recovery zone bonds. Good morning. This is the economic recovery zone bonds. So it's like $100+ million of similar to one of There is the city of Los. I don't know if we can get a close-up. Why don't you leave the map there? That's fine. Are we able to get the a camera onto that map? Yeah, maybe we'll put it by the podium. Keep it in one place, and we'll see if we can get a camera shot. Just before we say anything else, why don't we establish what the economic recovery zones are and where it is in Los Angeles? And good morning. Who wants to go first?
Should I go first?
Okay.
Good morning. My name is May Smith, and I'm with the Community Development Department of the City of Los Angeles. Presented before you today is a report on the Action Seeking Council's declaration of a recovery zone pursuant to the provisions outlined in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. What that would do is to enable the city to issue two types of bonds: the Recovery Zone Economic Development Bonds as well as the Recovery Zone Facility Bonds. When the stimulus bill was signed into effect back in February, one of the new programs it introduced was the creation of Recovery Zone. A recovery zone is defined as an area that exhibits significant poverty, unemployment, general distress, and foreclosure. It also carries a current designation of a federal empowerment zone and renewal community. It will also show economic distress due to the closure or realignment of military installations. And with that, with those criteria, the city has come up with a composite map consisting of approximately 210 square miles, an overlay of 8 general areas consisting of the Federal Empowerment Zone, Federal Renewal Community, State Enterprise Zones, the targeted employment areas where the population earns below, where 51% of the population are low to moderate income persons. It also contains the airport and airport hospitality enhancement zone area, along with the community development project, community redevelopment agency project areas, and all the census tracts that are eligible for the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Agent funding, as well as areas that are negatively impacted by widespread foreclosure and therefore eligible for the Neighborhood Stabilization Program funding. An immediate opportunity for the City of Los Angeles arises in the availability of two bond options. The first one is a public bond program called the Recovery Zone Economic Development Bond. The city, as an issuer, will receive a direct payment equaling to 45% of the interest paid on these bonds, and the eligible projects include municipal capital expenditures, public facilities, public infrastructure projects, as well as job training and education programs.
But just to be clear, on those, so those would be for public projects?
Yes.
Done by the city?
Yes.
Or we could bond for other public entities that are in the Southland? It's just specifically for the city?
City of Los Angeles.
So it's like expanding our MICLA capacity?
Similar.
I mean, similar types of projects, not the same mechanism. Okay.
A second type of bond is the tax-exempt private activity bond called the Recovery Zone Facility Bonds. These are the bonds where all the proceeds are derived from the private sector and will have no impact on the general fund. Eligible projects include industrial and commercial facilities, mixed-use projects, parking facilities, hotels, convention centers, biomed, research and development, green and energy-efficient facilities.
So this expands the categories, but would work somewhat like our Industrial Development Authority has bond authority to help private entities and nonprofit entities be able to achieve funding.
Okay. And there is a national allocation governing these two types of bonds. For the public purpose bonds, the national volume cap is $10 billion. For the private activity bonds, the national cap is $15 billion. Each state receives an allocation based on its job employment losses between December 07 and December 08. And the state subsequently will reallocate it to its local communities, counties, and municipalities with population exceeding 100,000 people. The City of Los Angeles has received a public bond Recovery Zone Economic Development Bond allocation of $179.2 million. And for the private activity Recovery Zone Facility Bonds, we have received $269.2 million. The proceeds of these two new categories are only available to us after City Council or the local jurisdiction has declared and designated a recovery zone, which is the action we are requesting today. And this particular recovery zone designation will sunset on December 31st, 2010, unless it is otherwise extended. Because of the compressed timeline, a working group consisting of representatives from the mayor's office, the city administrative officer, chief legislative analyst, community redevelopment agency, community development department, and the city attorney, we have been meeting on a regular basis, and we have come up with program guidelines and the framework which outlines the bond sizing, the timeliness, priority consideration, the administration, monitoring, and reporting requirements that are consistent with the city's current practices and policies, and the details are contained in your report. And as well, we...
So sorry, just to go back there, that's the working group. What sort of governance model do we have for, the IDA board, for instance, usually recommends for their bonds, MICLA go through here, and IDA stuff comes to us eventually, but what is the governance model here?
Natalie Brill, the City Administrative Officer. These bond allocations are actually a direct allocation from the U.S. Treasury to the City of Los Angeles. The allocation was given to the City of Los Angeles. So the governance is basically the City Council. These are bonds that can be issued by an agency that the City Council wishes to issue. The CEO believes that I think we have the ability within the city family to be able to issue these bonds ourselves. It really is an allocation to the City of Los Angeles.
And if we do those for our public projects, Ms. Hahn has spoken, for instance, a lot about big sidewalk projects that we could put people back to work. We have to pay back our own bonds for the it's just like MICLA funding.
Correct.
We'd have to pay that back from future receipts. What is the timeline for payment on these? How long are these bonds for, the public ones?
It's unclear from the legislation. You can do 20 to 30 years. Most of our bonds within the city would fall within the 20 to 30 year range. The one advantage to this program is that you do receive 45% direct payment back on the interest. As you know, last week we did the BABs and that with the Build America bonds, and that was a 35% subsidy. So this is a 45% subsidy. The difference is that this requires the adoption of a recovery zone, so really economic development bonds to stimulate, obviously, the economy. So.
Yeah, there's a little portion, Mr. Parks, I think a tiny little bit of white that we need to get in there, but otherwise everything. So if we could zoom in on the map for a second for the public. The pink areas here, I don't know if we're able to do that in the studio, but the pink areas here show what the proposed recovery zone for the City of Los Angeles would be. And I assume this is based on past empowerment zones and enterprise zones and the state and federal ones. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, because we also have some areas that there's a shot. If we zoom out a tiny little bit, you can see all the way down even to the harbor. Thank you. So it extends from the northernmost stretch of the San Fernando Valley to the southernmost point of the Port and Wilmington and San Pedro areas, stretches up through South Los Angeles, includes east and northeast Los Angeles, the center of LA, some pockets in west Los Angeles, and then throughout the west, south and east San Fernando valleys as well. So it's pretty extensive where this could apply to, and the job losses that we've experienced in various parts of the city would all be covered by this. So I just want to make sure that folks out there could see that. Who wants to continue? CLA? Anybody? Ivani, would you like to add anything? We're a little pressed because we're at about 5 minutes before the council meeting, so I want to make sure we can get through this.
Just to explain a little bit more, Ivania Salvador with the Legislative Analyst's Office regarding the steering committee and the criteria for the bonds. We do have in the report a framework of how we intend to proceed with coming back to council with recommendations on which projects to fund. Again, there is a very quick turnaround on these bonds, so we want to start as soon as possible to review the city budget and look and see where we can take advantage of these bonds. Page 5 of our report recommends a criteria and a priority consideration for the types of projects that we would like to see or begin to look at to take, again, advantage of these bonds, both the public purpose bonds and the private activity projects. The steering committee, again, will be chaired by the CAO and have the relevant city departments on there, and we'll come back with recommendations to this to the council. Additionally, we will request also that this committee, I'd like to make request an amendment to also approve a resolution that would... Pardon me?
Is that the CIDLAC?
Yes, that's the CIDLAC motion that we would like to request that this committee also adopt this resolution, which would allow us to submit comments to CIDLAC regarding any issues that would affect the city's allocation. In other words, the provisions or any provisions or regulations that would include a waiver of the city's recovery zone bond allocations. And CIDLAC is considering setting some deadlines and some reversions if the funds aren't spent by a certain time. So we would like to be able to comment on those.
Sure. I'll go ahead and move that then. If there's no objection, that'll be accepted as part of the actions. One last question. Let's see if my colleagues have any questions as well. What sort of public outreach are we going to do for this? You know, it was actually a great experience earlier this week when we went through the Section 108 exercise, because a lot of people said $30 million for a circus, and when you walk people through that we had $350 million, that this money was sitting there, that this was available for other projects, and that they should contact the city. 9 out of 10 people, once everything was explained, said, oh, this is a good deal for the city, 1 million visitors, and a lot of activity, but we never knew about it, and they pay it back. But we didn't know about this. Similar to this with these bonds, part of it is getting that word out. So what sort of public process will we have in terms of letting people know, workshopping this? I mean, I guess it's a CDD question, but anybody can answer it as well. Certainly in the input of how we design it, maybe even before that, is something that I think is going to be critically important, because time is ticking, and one of the problems with the economic recovery is a lot of this money has been allocated but not spent. And we want to get this money out on the street, and we want a business today who's thinking of making an investment to know what they may be able to do. So, who wants to take a crack?
Do you want to talk about the steering
That sort of public outreach?
I think that one of the things the committee will be doing is public outreach. We've been working as a group, and the process that CDD goes through when it does its own bonding is pretty much the procedures that we'll do. We've talked about public notices. We've talked about giving the council information about how to apply. We've talked about a application process that would be basically describing your project and meeting the criteria. So we have begun that process already, and as soon as this goes through council, we will continue to do additional reach out through computer, through the council offices, through the same process CDD would go through. And you're right, workshops, informational meetings, all that will be done within the next couple of months, because we do have a very strict deadline.
Okay. I'd like to have one of those workshops in my district in Hollywood, and I think we should work with our chambers of commerce to get that information out. And maybe I can propose that DWP could even do an insert in their commercial industrial ratepayers bills to let people know about this. That's one of the best ways we sometimes are able to touch folks and let them know.
Yes, CDD will continue to conduct workshops specifically in the areas that you have specified.
Okay, and I'm sure my colleagues would like to as well. Questions from Mr. Barks?
Asked on the zones that were created, how closely do the zones relate to the CDD poverty maps? Are they pretty well inclusive of them, or is it broader?
It's quite comprehensive. As you can see, there are 8 various areas, including the Federal Empowerment Zone, Renewal Community Enterprise Zone, Targeted Employment Areas, census tracts that are eligible for Economic Development Agency funding. So these are all low to moderate income census tracts.
I know, but the issue is CDD has a very comprehensive map about poverty in the city. Does this overlay that map?
Correct.
So it's inclusive of those areas?
Yes.
Okay. The other thing is that who's the lead on both sets of bonds? Is it CAO that would let the bonds? Is it CDD? Or
We're chairing the committee, but we're all working together to make sure it gets done.
What committee is that?
It's not a committee, it's a working group.
Okay, so a working group that basically evaluates projects?
Correct.
Okay.
And then we'll come back to you with what we feel is the projects that meet the criteria that you're adopting.
All right. Then let me ask you in the sense of the council offices, how do they get their projects? Are they projects in the stream that you're looking to use the bonds, the council officers bring you projects that they're working on? How does that work?
Yes, Councilmember, the office can contact any of the members of the steering committee and bring forward a project to the steering committee. Again, we anticipate that a lot of the projects are already projects that are in some type of a pipeline and have been reviewed or at a different stage of development that may be eligible for these types of funds.
Yes. One of the things I'd ask is, Mr. Garcetti asked about how we're going to advise the public, but we also need some effort to advise council offices so they're not left out of the loop.
Absolutely. We mentioned that you will have copies of the criteria. You know, I believe that CD is coming up with an application process similar to what they've done in the past. So all that will go through the council offices.
And give us another timeline. You say it's very...
Absolutely.
What's the strict timeline we're working on?
We have to have issued the bonds by January 1st, 2011.
Okay.
Unless it's extended.
Okay. And then my final question, does this evolve or come through the mayor's business team, or is this directly directed at the council offices for project?
I think it's this working group is where it's coming from. The mayor's office sits on the committee.
It's not a project.
On the group.
Okay, but the working group is the one that's guiding it. It is not a project in the business team.
No.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. With no further questions, we'll go ahead and move to adopt the report then, and the amendment added to that. And that will...
They destroyed the business.
Do we have any cards? Nope. Okay. All right. So this meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Economic Recovery and Reinvestment is hereby adjourned, and we'll begin the City Council meeting shortly. Thank you, everybody.